how tech has changed estate agency in the last 20 years. Today, I'm joined by Steve Wayne, boss man of Benjamin Stevens, estate agency in London, and very well known amongst the estate agency community. Thanks for joining me today, Steve.
Pleasure as always. Fine, so I think you've got to start looking at tech. Tech's changed the whole industry. I remember...
Has it changed it?
It's changed the industry massively. I remember as a 17-year-old and Thursday afternoons the papers would come out and our phones would just ring and I'd sit there with a blank piece of paper registering people and just booking in viewings. You know, with Rightmove now and Zoopla, there's no busy day, every day's busy. But as agents, we've changed. You know, I've said it and people might not like it, but estate agency has become a very lazy industry. We've got a thing where we've got new starters starting and we're not telling them anything about portal leads anymore. They need to pick up the phones and they need to make phone calls and they need to be salespeople, not the quickest person on the phone or the luckiest person on the phone. And I think that's been the biggest change.
You're not giving them the portal leads?
We're not giving them the email leads, no. They can learn to fight for those, but we want them to learn how to pick up the phone and sell outwards, not just receive inwards.
It's interesting. I put a post out with a load of youngsters surrounding a telephone saying they're afraid to pick up the phone.
But they can't be. And that's the difference between good and bad estate agents. People need to pick up the phone. People need to hear your voice. People need to speak to you.
So do you think what's changed in the last 20 years is that we've become afraid of the telephone?
If you go, I sometimes go out with the kids on a weekend and I go past an estate agent and they're either like this typing or they're on their mobiles. You very rarely walk past an estate agent and you see them banging out the phones. And that's one thing I grew up with. And that's what, you know, I'm obsessed with my office. It's not about call levels. It's about getting on the phone and having conversations. It's not about making 200 calls, but having 15 really good conversations. And I think you can't, you know, the amount of times, and I'm sure you've done it, where you sent someone a text and they've read it in the wrong way, but you can't have that on a phone call.
Correct.
And I think people take out the emotion. People take out, you know, it's cowardly almost to send a text with bad news and picking up the phone. And what makes a good estate agent, you know, we do block management, property management. The difference between good and bad is people who pick up the phone and actually are brave enough to turn around. You've got a leak, you've got a problem. It's so easy to send a text. But that's the generation of the world we live in now. People are looking for the easiest dominator rather than the one that actually gets you the best result. And people are looking for, you know, the easy way out. Like we use Stitch for WhatsApp, and it's great because certain people are at work and they can only go on WhatsApp and you have your conversation back and forward with that. But it lacks the depth and the heart of talking to someone. And I think, you know, for me, I've seen people screaming and shouting almost on an email. I phone them up and they retract and you talk to them like a human. And actually the problem's never as bad as they make out to be and you solve it. But I've also seen other people with the same problem go back and forth over email. And after 40 emails, they're fuming. And however quick you respond to an email, things can be said and done in a wrong way. And I think, you know, if you talked about one of the prime things with estate agency the last 20 years is we've lost the ability to talk.
Have you heard of that? There's some AI software for estate agents that will listen in on the calls and then not only summarise the call, but also give tips in real time on where to take the conversation.
I haven't heard of that, but I have heard of AI listening to your conversations and putting it into your notes, which I think, you know, is a great tool. But again, you know, AI can only do so much. You know, we can't let the robots take over. You know, and I think...
No, but the person's still making the call, and at least you have accountability and you know where the issues are, because you can't be on every call.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant idea. But people have got to pick up the phone and make the calls.
But then surely that comes down to the boss making the people accountable to make the calls.
Yeah, but the problem is if you start getting obsessed with numbers and not quality of calls, they need to buy into it. There's no point having someone in your office because all people have done, I've had staff do this, they'll pick up and call their mum 25 times. They'll go, look, I've made 60 calls. You know, they need to buy in and they need to believe it.
Okay, so how do you get your staff to buy in?
Because it's all about your business. You have to get your staff, you have to have, as each business needs to have an ethos. This is how we work.
A culture.
A culture. And if the staff don't buy into it, then they shouldn't be working for you.
So how do you create a great culture in your business?
By sitting downstairs, sitting with my staff, not turning around and walking in at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and leaving at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, being part of the team, getting on the phones. You don't need to match them call for call, but sometimes you need to sit with your staff and let them listen to you on the phone. And anything I would ever ask anyone to do, I will do myself. You know, I've had staff turn around and go, canvassing doesn't work, door knocking doesn't work, this doesn't work. So I've gone and done it with them. And every time, you, I've always turned around and go, you're right. You know, there's a joke in my office. Why are you doing that? Steve says, why? Well, he knows he's a boss. He's been there. He's done it. It's not like I've bought a business. I've started it from scratch, from, you know, a room half the size of this with 2 telephones and a filing cabinet. And I've grafted and I've done it. And there's nothing I'd ever ask anyone to do that I wouldn't do myself.
By the sounds of it, not much has changed in the last 20 years, but people have changed. And you know, you talked about tech. In reality, it comes down to the people. Tech helps us and enables us, but you still got to do the hard work, and you've got to drive it from the front, and it comes from the boss.
Yeah, I think, you know, and you know, we talked about in our earlier video about, you know, getting to a point of bored of a state agency. But I go downstairs for a couple of hours a day to get that energy, to get that enthusiasm, and you know, when I then start seeing other people bouncing off, then it's great. And you know, you can have all the tech in the world, but you know, you can get a Rightmove lead, and you know, I never believed this was a thing until I actually saw it. You know, you can send someone a Rightmove lead, and they don't call you back for 4 days. So you can have all the tech in the world, but if no one picks up the phone to book in that appointment, a computer can't open a door. A computer can't take an offer, and it's incredible the amount of estate agents that don't reply to things quickly and don't deal with things.
So really, you're not only saying tech has changed, but it's people have changed, and the balance is in.
Yeah, look, I think there's a million podcasts out there about generation A, B, C, D, generation Z and X. The younger generation are different to us, you know, and you get different ones, and you can't, like, you wouldn't do a whole people in one way, you can't do a whole generation. But the younger generation are, and they admit it, they find easier, quicker ways. The amount of them that people who don't want to get a job, they want to be YouTubers, they want to be Instagrammers, they don't want a traditional job. They look at it and go, a 9 to 5 is crazy. Why would you work that many hours when I can do 4 hours work? And I understand that, but that's the world has changed, and now you make me sound like an old man.
But it constantly changes, doesn't it?
It does constantly change, and I think if you can enable tech with hard work and with graft and with energy and desire, then you put it together, and then you have something magical. But you know, generally you've got twofold: the hard workers and the people who know how to use tech. You put that together, you know, which I try and do to a certain degree, and it should all click.
Thank you for your time today.